of moderator, perhaps it's best for you to begin the conversation.
Bismillah. Okay. Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. So when I was trying to figure out what we want to talk about today and what is the most pressing thing, there's been something that's been on my mind that I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on. Because it's kind of been, I don't know what the right word is, troubling me. We're all like kind of stewing. Everyone's stewing in something or thoughts and whatnot lately.
Mm-hmm.
One of the thoughts that, I've been thinking about a lot is, in this moment right now, I'm looking at this whole period of time that we're going through, the summer of 2020. Inshallah, hopefully it's only the summer of 2020. This is an incredible growth opportunity, right? This is a major disruption, and often with disruptive times, you can either see it as a setback or a growth opportunity. And so I'm looking at this as a major growth opportunity, and I can't help but start thinking, how do I get the most out of this opportunity? What's the biggest bang for my buck in terms of investment made? What do I invest in, and so forth? And, with social media, it's like, you could do this, you could do this, you could join this, activist cause. You could actually go into the cave mentality, go back into the lab and work on yourself. You could go learn stuff. And then on top of that, even if you just look at what happened during Ramadan this year, it's like there is just no shortage of educational material, right? I mean, just people are, just institutions and so forth, are just pumping out huge amounts of information. And so getting lost in all this, so that's kind of like the big picture, that, the context is like, there's so much out there right now, and there's so much that we can be directing our attention to. And I'm asking myself specifically, is like, what can I do to make the most of my time? Do I want to go learn more about Imam al-Ghazali? Do I want to do this deep dive in Surah Al-Kahf for 30 lectures with somebody? Do I want to do this? Or should I block that away and become more activist and stop doing the academic excuse of learning more and not, getting my, the rubber to the road, et cetera, et cetera? What's the best, use of time? And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and this is why I brought this topic about knowledge of self, is that my concern is that, and maybe I'm saying this as someone who's now, alhamdulillah, I've reached past my 40s now. So I've probably had more time than maybe most people watching here.
And well preserved, mashallah.
I mean, you're seeing me only from here up right now. So, but this idea of, I get very anxious. Right now I'm creating a curriculum that I've been posting on YouTube and so forth, and that curriculum that I'm creating is really for my boys, because I'm just like, if I have to give them Islam or everything that I have come to, and just give it to them before something happens to me. That's kind of like the way I've been setting up in my mentality as I'm putting out content right now. I feel rushed because I don't know, maybe something could happen to me. I'm working in the hospitals and this and that. What do I really want them to get away from this? And I'm wondering how much of the conversation has been about self-reflection and knowledge of the self, as opposed to here's another, 20 lectures on, some fiqh topic, or even tafsir, okay? Even Quran. It's very easy to get lost in this stuff. And to keep, we have that word that we use at Ta'lif a lot, and the whole idea of spiritual bypassing and so forth, right? I think there's also this concept of academic bypassing. It's like, let me learn the Arabic now. I need to enroll in the Arabic course, and then I need to enroll in this course and that course. And I wanted to ask you your thoughts on this, and this is why I love Alam, right? Is because there is this emphasis on what's going on in your head, not what is the material, but what is your own dashboard? What is your speedometer? What is your tachometer showing in your life? And so I wanted to kind of open up this conversation with you about what are your thoughts on how much time ought we to be putting into self-reflection, and what does it actually mean? Because it's like a buzzword. know yourself, and if you know yourself, you know Allah and so forth. But what does it actually really mean in tangible, meaningful ways? How do I know that I know myself? Like, have I arrived there? It's different than like fiqh, where it's like, oh, I memorized this, or I know how to do these things. How do I know that I know myself? And these are questions that I don't know if we've been having that conversation enough. I know there was one incredible series that I am still going through out of Cambridge Muslim College this year with, I think it was Abdullah Rothman did a great series, and it was very focused on knowledge of the self and so forth. But I kind of wanted to throw that out to you as an introductory kind of comment, is like, and this is also in the context of like, now we're dealing with racisms and all these issues. People are starting to check themselves a little bit. Like, wait, maybe we are racist. Maybe we, and so there's a little bit there's a moment, I think, here for kind of self-appraisal. And so I kind of want to throw it out there. I mean, I have a lot of other ideas that I'll ask you, but that's kind of where this is coming from. Why am I picking this topic of knowledge of self? What does it actually mean in a real way in the 21st century? How do you know if you know yourself, or you're just lying to yourself so you can move on to the next topic or whatever? So that's kind of why I want to discuss this with you.
Yeah, I mean, that and the purpose of life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But big topics, broad topics, and I'm thinking of my sister Yasmin's suggestion about going into a topic like this, expecting that we hold space, for one another. This kind of conversation almost necessarily becomes deeply personal. There's no one size fits all way of discussing things like individual purpose, because this is a different this is a different lane, so as to speak, than kind of ultimate collective purpose, right? Ultimate collective purpose is we know to worship, right? God said, we have not created jinn or human beings except for the purpose of worship. Now, inside of that, knowing myself is a much broader question. I tend to think that knowledge of self is much more about an introspective journey than it is a destination. I don't think, when one thinks about knowledge of self conceptually, I don't think that one gets to a place in which she is satisfied with her knowledge of herself, or he is satisfied with his knowledge of himself. I think that as a pursuit, it reminds us to be internally focused. It reminds us to be introspective. It reminds us to take stock of ourselves regularly. The Prophet, peace be upon him, one of the less talked about aspects of his sunnah is muraqabah, or taking stock of oneself, accounting for oneself, right? Khalwa, spending some time in seclusion, some time in which the only intentional activity that you've planned is contemplation, is reflection. All of this promotes this kind of exploration that you were referring to in your introductory remarks. Now, in terms of what one is supposed to find, I think that differs from person to person. One of the things that makes our religious community great is that Islam broadly has always been an incubator for different kinds of talent, different kinds of focus. One of the great misfortunes, in my estimation, of the current age is that we have lionized Islamic scholarship, and we have minimized the importance or significance of anything else. When we think about ways that a person can use their individual interests, talents, pursuits, to serve Islam, we think, okay, the choice is to become an alim or to, to deepen one's Islamic knowledge, or to have a different focus altogether. Whereas I think if one, okay, if one is rooted,
no, keep going.
If one is rooted, thoroughly, deeply ensconced in worship, meaning like this is something that frames my experience, right? I'm worshiping my Lord, right? Kind of that macro purpose is being satisfied. I'm worshiping. I think inside of that, you feel liberated to pursue what you are inherently inclined toward. And the reason I say that you're liberated is because I think if your worship is consistent and strong, you can trust those proclivities. You can trust those inclinations. You trust them. If a person is worshiping and just really, and I just finished meeting with a friend of mine that is, you think you did something unusual and being, an author of Sirah and an anesthesiologist. This guy is an ER doctor and a stand-up comedian. Right, so that's an interesting combination. But I was telling him, to root himself in his worship, just be consistent in your prayer. Try to be consistent in your, dhikr, in your remembrance. And then if you're rooted in those, let your creative influence guide you. And don't do it in this prepackaged, preachy, didactic way. Let your experience as someone living Islam flow freely and creatively into something that will, of course, be of service to our community. So I think, the macro serves the micro in that way. If you're rooted in your worship. Now, if you aren't rooted,
okay, but let's take a step back for a second, because I want to I would like to come out of this with a concrete something, something I can act on, you know what I mean? And so even when you're saying worship, establish your worship and be consistent in that, and it's going to give you something. That's what I'm hearing from you, you know what I mean? And and so even if we take a step back from that, okay, well, even before you get to worship, our worship, necessarily it's a relationship. It's basically every act of worship is, you and your creator in some type of interaction, one way or the other. And so, what if our worship is not feeling very powerful? And our worship is not feeling powerful because we don't know ourselves. You go, since it's a relationship, let's use any relationship. You're interested in somebody, and but you don't really know yourself. I mean, we see this is why a lot of marriages struggle, is because people choose their partner before they truly understand who they are. And now you have this problem because now you're living together, and now the true person comes out, and the other person's like, well, I didn't sign up for that, blah, blah, blah. This is usually how, relationships lose their luster, because the act is over and now the real person comes out. And it's often not the fault of the person, because they themselves, it's not their fault in a purposeful way, because they themselves didn't know themselves. So they actually knew what they wanted. So classic example, if you see someone who is getting married for the second time, they're usually a lot more aware of who they are and what they need in a relationship. And they're much more likely not to make the same mistakes again. So in the same way, knowledge of self is so important to having a meaningful relationship with another person. And so even when we're talking about worship, I want to go even back to square one, square zero, because, I was at work today, and I was acquainting myself with Imam al-Ghazali's Alchemy of Happiness. And he begins, knowledge of the self is chapter number 1. Before knowledge of Allah. Knowledge of self is everything. Without knowledge of self, you have nothing to talk about, or you don't even know how to be with or how to begin that worship. And I've been looking at this material right here, and he says in here that I'm going to read this now because this stuck out to me, because this is going on in this landscape of information and material, and brother, you need to learn this, and sister, you need to master this. And like you said, we have this this kind of construct of becoming like junior students and junior ulama, like we feel like that's our validation.
Sure.
And he says, if we are to arrive at pure spiritual truth, we must put away for the time knowledge which has been acquired by external processes and which too often hardens into dogmatic prejudice. Meaning like kind of like what he did is like just put it all away and just like go and just be in the world and be with people and figure out what is going on in here and forget about what the Sheikh said and what Ibn Kathir said and what he said and so forth. What was your experience with this beggar? What was your experience when, you know, at the rest stop?
Yeah, I would, and I
broke
would,
down?
and this is what I was gonna say. I wouldn't attempt to headbutt the clouds in disagreeing with the great Imam Ghazali. I would do that, right? However, I think what Imam Ghazali is talking about is getting back to what you know inherently. This is this is knowledge that is not acquired through the prism of theology or fiqh or philosophy. What do you inherently and experientially know about yourself, about existence, about, you know, being finite, about, you know, not completely understanding or realizing that from whence you came? Like, what are the things that you know inherently as a human being? I think all of us have to do that exploration. That is, you know, Dr. Jackson used to say that one of the reasons we end up arguing with people about God is that we enter the debate, we enter the conversation talking about the aspect of the conversation that has traditionally been most contentious, God. If, on the other hand, we started with humanity, we started with what does it mean to be human? Just starting there. What does it mean to be a human being? What does that mean? And we have, you know, voluminous bodies of literature, whether we're talking people attempting to answer that philosophically, religiously, artistically, scientifically, trying to answer that question. I think the most important thing about the pursuit is that all of us want to know that we are above and beyond anything else. If you want something concrete, we are meaning-making creatures. And this is a part of our consciousness. You know, human beings are uniquely conscious beings. In fact, you know, and you might appreciate this, this is the one thing that many evolutionary biologists have a difficult time explaining is human consciousness. Because if we have evolved, which, and I'm not here saying that, you know, the idea that, you know, micro evolution is consistent with Islam, I'm very comfortable with that idea. But it still does leave the question that how does a uniquely conscious creature, right, that can conceptualize himself in time space, where did I come from? Where am I going? What's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? A creature that can conceptualize themselves in time space in that way, being evolved or evolving from a creature that apparently cannot, you know, is a serious question. So go ahead.
It is. And so I love that you said that we are meaning making machines. I completely agree with that. And, you know, when I've learned about this is that that's absolutely the case, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we derive the correct meaning. We tell ourselves stories and we create meanings about our lives all the time. That's what racism is. That's what oppression is we've created meaning out of paradigms, out of icons, statues, people in the past. And I guess what I'm getting at, see, like, okay, so all this that we're talking about right now, I've been thinking about in the context of, obviously, you know, like, you know, the name that's been coming up a lot is, you know, the legacy and the life of Malcolm X, right? Rahimahullah. And if you look at him, right, and his life and what he created in this land, his legacy in this land, he was a force of nature. He was a force of Allah. He was a force of nature. And what was so special about him, and again, from like my limited compared to people who really, biographers of him, but from what I know of him is like one thing I could take to the bank about him is that he had a very specific outlook on life. And he was, I've been kind of delving into this idea of these personality types, people who are fixed mindset people and growth mindset people. And to me, he is an archetype of a growth mindset person. So someone who is not connected to who they are, but about the possibility of who they can be. And they're not scared to shed whatever they've had. They're not scared of looking stupid. They're not scared of making mistakes. They're not scared of anything that they've done. They're not ashamed of their journey, so long as they are looking at the compass and be like, this is where I need to go next. Okay. Compared to what did he know about, Ibn Kathir, and what did he know about Surah Al-Kahf, and what did he know about all this live streaming that is being kind of pumped into our
but
homes now.
I hear something different when you talk about Malcolm in that way. What I hear is confidence and tawakkul and reliance. That listen, I don't know exactly how I got to where I am now. And I don't know exactly where I'm going, but there is something within that allows me to trust the process, to believe in my own journey and to believe in myself. I always tell people that as a convert to Islam, it's a lot of people don't realize that conversion is never linear in the way that we talk about it. Many converts talk about conversion in a very linear way, like, one day I was a Christian and then I became a Muslim. When in actuality, there was a time in which I felt that my Christianity was in a sense, Christianity had ceased to be compelling to me. But I was not yet Muslim. I was just on my own with a confident belief. No tradition, no scripture, no Ibn Kathir, no nothing. Just a belief. I don't know why we're picking on Ibn Kathir, Allah yarham. But just a belief, just a belief in myself, in God, in my destiny, in a sense, that I was able to say, well, I know I don't believe in this. I know this set of theological principles, precepts, is not representative of what I actually believe is true. I don't have a tradition or a scripture or a set of theological principles that I believe in a definite, defined way, but I know I'm going somewhere. And I always say that the most liberating thing for a convert is your willingness to trust that. And then I found Islam.
Right, but that's a huge journey. See, so again, here's another overlay on this, okay? And I'll speak from the context of the community that's been born into Islam. I think that there is a real palpable sense within the Muslim community, the non-convert Muslim community of, if you look at, Hassan Minhaj did this great, thing on, racism in the Indo-Pak community in like one of his talks. There's definitely a magnifying glass that I think a lot of people are starting to put on themselves within the Muslim-born Muslim community, especially the immigrant Muslim community, right? That we have, in many ways, been very comfortable. The system's been working for a lot of us. And so, now is a time I would hope that there's a fair amount of introspection, even amongst the older aunties and uncles in the community about their relationship with the Black American community and just their relationship with racism in general. And so, you know, what you went through and what a lot of converts go through, I would imagine for the most part, not to overgeneralize or over romanticize the conversion process, but it does require some serious heart work, some serious heavy lifting and uncovering stuff. Just the fact that you're possibility of leaving a family tradition usually requires some serious heavy lifting, some serious questions internally, which a lot of people born into it have just cruised without, I think, necessarily having these hijrah moments, these shahada moments. And you know, and I'm seeing this, I'm hearing about this now. People saying, wow, I never thought of that. I never really made the shahada. I mean, like, no one's actually saying that, but like this moment of like, I've never fully been in it.
Yeah, I never had my,
maybe,
you know, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just had a thought.
from the context of that community or not, is there needs, you know, this idea of like, who am I? This is what Imam al-Ghazali says in his opening thing. It's like the main question is like, who are you? Like, where are you from? Where are you going? Right? فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? And what brings you misery and what brings you true happiness? Like these questions. And I would very confidently say that the vast majority of people do not actually know what makes them happy, which is why, and the proof of that is that we are chasing materialism, because the science is very clear that that will never make you happy. The science is very clear that happiness is not something that you can pursue. Happiness is something that ensues through a life of purpose. And yet, you know, we all think we can bypass the system and buy it. And
you know,
so that's what I'm saying. You know,
it's interesting, man, because you know, one of the tafsirs, you know, one of the, you know, exegetical writings on this topic that I've encountered in the past, you know, is that when Allah gathered all of our species, right, all human beings, and He said, "Alastu bi rabbikum," you know, am I not your Lord?
yes.
And the Quran says that we all testify to God's divinity. We all testify to His lordship. That in that moment of testifying to His lordship, we experienced great ecstasy. There was great satisfaction. And that when we are ensouled in our bodies, we go about life seeking that same ecstatic kind of like union, seeking something that recalls, something that recaptures that moment. And this can, if channeled correctly, lead to the remembrance of God. Is it other than is it not with the remembrance of God that hearts find rest? Or it can lead us into the direction of great hedonism, seeking that ecstasy, seeking that satisfaction, seeking that pleasure, if you will, you know, in all of the wrong places, you know. And the thing about that, you know, something C.S. Lewis said that I always think about whenever I'm weighing, you know, this polarity, is that, you know, for every, you know, C.S. Lewis, you know, writing in, you know, Victorian England, he said, for everything that the human being desires, there's usually a way to satisfy that desire. So that if I get thirsty, there's water. If I get hungry, there's food. If I desire companionship, there's a companion, etc. He said, but if you find within yourself a desire that cannot be satisfied by anything of this world, the only thing you can conclude is that you were not created for this world.
The only things, repeat that, because
the only thing that if you find that you have a desire that cannot be satisfied by anything in this world, the only thing you can conclude then is that you were not created for this world.
Which is exactly goes back to what you were saying before, from what the Quran is saying. But
right, you weren't created for this world. But I do think part of, you know, if I'm grasping what you're saying, because I'm all over the question. First I was talking about letting
Your
your
body.
creative,
Yeah.
letting your creative influence guide you. Then we talked about, if you're rooted in your worship, trust that creative influence. If you're not rooted in your worship, don't trust that creative. Don't always trust that creative influence.
Yeah.
Then we talked about um, kind of, knowing, being in touch with your humanity. What does it mean to be
Yes.
you? What does it mean to be you? Put away all of the theological stuff, the philosophical stuff, the historical stuff, the scientific stuff, all of
Yes.
these bodies of knowledge that, like Imam Ghazali says, become dogmas. These are just dogmas that you've accepted and you're just kind of living according to them. What do you inherently know to be true about yourself, about where you are,
Right.
who you are, and where you're going? And that calls upon us.
See, but that's the question. It's just, but to make it concrete, I want to make this concrete right now, like in terms of what is it? And I would love to see in the chat right now, if people are, maybe people can contribute to this. What are the things that allow you to come to know yourself? And what are the things that have exposed the lies that we have told ourselves over time? Like and part of it, is what is the mindset that is required to even begin to endeavor on this? Okay. I'm see, my concern is this. My concern is that we're missing a moment. And I hope, inshallah, that we don't miss a moment right now. All of us, and myself personally, is that I have an opportunity here to move out of 2020, inshallah, and look back on 2020 and be like, yeah, we didn't get out. I didn't travel much. I was home with the kids. But something happened magical in the summer of 2020 that I am forever on a mission. I have found my bearing in the world. I know I have to march, 37 degrees due north to get to where my destination is. There was a major reorienting that happened. And yeah, some of it may have happened from conversations I heard and discussions and books that I read, but really it was, ultimately the orientation has to come from within. And so,
but you know what,
that's what I'm worried about, is I don't want us as a community to miss the moment.
You know what, but see, this is the thing. The only way, or the only thing I would take issue with about what you're saying is that the journey that you describe sounds very personal. Whereas I think much of what we see in ourselves, we only see when we look at ourselves in or through other people, right? This hadith that we say in passing, that we teach our children, I don't think we've ever really contemplated its profundity. Al-mu'minu mir'atul mu'mini. The believer is the mirror of the believer. So if I probably won't know how much self-awareness I lack, or how much presence I lack, or how much clarity I lack, until I see someone that actually has those things that I lack. It won't, it's very easy for me to just blissfully kind of just go about my norm until I see someone that is really alive, and I say, oh shoot, what have I been missing?
Yes.
What have I?
Yeah, exactly. But see, in this moment right now, okay, look, this is what when you were talking to Dr. Jackson, I think last week or the week before last week, one of the things that I heard that you say that stuck in my head is that you were surprised, you would see a post or something like that, and you mentioned something like you were surprised every now and then when you'd see someone that you knew, an acquaintance, on your phone, you're on your phone, you're looking, and you see someone who you knew taking a strong stand in the moment right now, with racism. And you're like, wow, I know this guy. I didn't realize they were feeling so compelled by this moment. And in many ways, that's like, you know, for you, I would imagine it's like, whoa, you know, you have this moment where you're like, I didn't realize this person felt so strongly about justice or whatever and so forth. And so in many ways, we have this opportunity to, but we are now, you know, maybe one of the reasons I'm bringing this up right now also is I would imagine the Alam community, I don't know the average age of the Alam community right now or the average age of the people watching right now, but you know, when I joined Alam, when I started really growing through Alam, I was in my possibly teens, definitely early 20s. And I am now finding myself at a different moment in life right now. Like we used to talk about a lot of this stuff back when like I still had like, you know, tons of school and, you know, I didn't have a paycheck for the next, you know, like I didn't feel like I had a lot to offer. So
you know,
that's why
Miraj,
I was learning.
I thought you were going to say tons of hair. I thought you were going to say tons of hair.
Oh,
but I had tons of hair.
That was even before that. Even before those days. But now I'm slick. I'm much slicker than I used to be. That's one thing I'll tell you. I'm much slicker. I think we all are. Alhamdulillah. But
as am I, bro. As am
I. But we are now in a moment right now where I am at the point in my life and my colleagues, the people who I went to Alam with, the founders of Alam, all of these people, we're in the decade of our lives where we have to, inshallah, be making the mark, not waiting for people to make the mark. We are now at the age. That's what Alam was for, in my understanding, you know, and a lot of, you know, hopefully like-minded things was to generate the kinds of leaders who now are leading, not just learning and continuing to, you know, we are those people who are inspiring and inshallah being mirrors for other people, you know.
You know, but you know, Miraj, I want to say something. I want to say something about this, man. You know, and this is one of the real concrete takeaways that I have about this moment that we're in. I think a lot of times, and this, right, you're an anesthesiologist, so I think a lot of times we fail to realize that just competing in dunya can anesthetize us to like to actually being present as you. Like this is one of my discontents with capitalism generally. It's just too consumptive, bro. It takes up too much. It takes, you know, it's like that verse, "Alhaakumut takathur hatta zurtumul maqabir." God says, just wealth and mutual rivalry about money distracts you. And look, Allah says, not just in your earning years, not just when you're young, until you reach the cemetery. Like, this is something that can consume you until you die. You can just be consumed with, you know, bills and stuff and cars and clothes and travel and summer homes and adding something to the home and tuition and college, then the grant. Like, this is not something that is innocuous. It can really just consume you. And what I think happened with the George Floyd killing is that because of COVID, we had slowed down just a little bit. I mean, most of us were still on our high-speed internets and binge watching our favorite television shows, and you know, it wasn't like we were in a concentration camp, but we had things that slowed down just a little bit. Then we were allowed to feel the great injustice that occurs when a person is killed in police custody like that. And the thing that I said to myself, to your point of like introspection and this being the moment, was, damn, how much do I miss just being consumed with dunya? Because ordinarily I probably would have read the headline, felt some anger, and then probably immediately started thinking about my children's private school tuition or something like that, or immediately started thinking about my savings or something, or where I was traveling to that weekend to work, or the lectures that I had to do. And so I really think that
we were more present. We were just more present.
We're just more present right now, man.
Yeah.
We're just more present right now.
In this moment. And so So, I mean, yeah, I'm looking at some of the comments while we're chatting here, because I think Yasmin said something which I agree with right now. Is that I do think that the immigrant Muslim community is experiencing the initial stages of a pain of growth that it hasn't before. I agree with that completely. And I guess, and she's saying there's no concrete way to do it. It's an exploration of self and will never be finished. I agree with that too. But I do want to feel like there are concrete ways. I would like to think, and that's what I kind of wanted to talk to you about, because I don't want to be like, yeah, we have to know each other, we have to know ourselves better, inshallah, and then we move on, and then it's just like another
right. What
fluffy conversation in the
yeah,
sense that
what does that mean? What does that mean, right?
Yeah, like what does that mean? Like knowledge of self and so forth. And I would like to think there are concrete ways to arrive closer at knowledge of self. And even if we don't establish in this conversation right now what those concrete ways are, I have my own experiences, I could share about what I think were concrete ways to know self. But even before that step is within the Muslim community creating and we've talked about this before, like there's been a huge push in the last 15 years to learn Quranic Arabic, right? That's become like I think, at least from where I'm sitting, you have all these institutes and learn, and you're this program and that program. So Quranic Arabic has been a big thing. Okay. Then you have the Sirah push in some circles has been a big thing, and so forth. What I would like, I don't know, I don't know how we would do this, is that there is a push in our community about people recognizing that the importance of self-reflection, the importance of understanding how to discover the narratives that you tell yourself.
I want to stop you there, though. I think even if we look at what we just spoke of a few minutes ago, I think from there we are able to distill, a very important lesson that I think is the lesson of this moment. That if I, like the idea that my personal comfort, my personal satisfaction, and my pursuits, I can go after them with such abandon that they can make me numb to real things going on around me, including my own growth, including my reflection. So I think that part of, you want something concrete, I think one of the things that we're seeing in this moment is that maybe we should have an intentional regiment of some unplugging, an intentional regiment of some discomfort, an intentional regiment. Like this happened, COVID-19, none of us planned that. It just happened. But we see how it has impacted us. One of the things that Ramadan is supposed to do, and this is why, this conversation is all over the place, which is just a sign that we didn't rehearse this. We're literally two guys over 1,000 miles away trying to, pin the tail on a moving donkey, in the conversation. But Ramadan is like a self-imposed period of hardship that is supposed to produce just the growth that you're talking about, right?
Right. But we're, and this is I think the blessing of this. That's why I'm looking back and I'm saying, when I say I don't want to miss the moment, I'm not saying that we are or we're unaware of it. I'm just saying, how do we make the most out of it? And what I'm hearing from you is that what has been imposed upon us, right, has been a blessing, and it's an opportunity, because we are being forced to be more present, if nothing else, to our families. Okay, but like you said, we are forced to being more present to the raw realities of the society we live in, because we are seeing the absolute breakdown and impotence of so many institutions, which, as long as they didn't bug us, we didn't really bug them. Okay, and now we are seeing in the moment the breakdown of a lot of institutions. So what that's creating, I vibe, where we're starting to question everything, right? We don't know if, like, Social Security really going to come through for me. Is this going to happen? And, if this, whatever, wherever we are, we're questioning everything, all the institutions right now, because everything is kind of broken, or it could break. And so in that moment right now, and that's what I'm trying to say is, like, concretely, right? I'm at a place right now, as I think about my own life, where I'm recognizing that in many ways, and I've had this conversation with a few other people, like, there's an element of it's time to go back to the basics again.
Yeah.
Okay? And I don't know, I would love to hear if other people feel this way, or maybe I'm just, like, on my own journey or whatever, but, like, in a way that, that early Meccan period, if we want to, like, kind of pivot to the Sirah for a second, that early Meccan period was so necessary to create the types of people who are going to stand next to the Prophet ﷺ and be like, are we doing this thing at Badr or not? That it required this very self-reflective early Meccan period of these surahs of where are you going, what are you doing, who are you, this and that. So I guess let me restate this in terms of Sirah. Okay, when you look at the Sirah, you see that a lot of the stuff, I always call the Sirah a 4-quadrant game. A lot of the heaviness was happening in the 3rd quadrant, like the battles and, like, the struggles and the opposition, where the Muslims actually have some autonomy to actually exercise influence and to defend and to fight and so forth. But that required 2 quarters of getting your act together, getting your game together, knowing who's playing whose position, knowing what your true strengths are, and that's why you're a defense. That's why you're not offense. And stop wanting to be the striker and score goals, because you recognize self, and I need to play defense for my team. And what I am feeling in this moment right now is that, a lot of us might be feeling thrust in this Meccan period, right? You mentioned this with Dr. Jackson when you were talking about the idea of, looting, and, the verse in the Quran about the injustice of taking their wealth away and the greater injustices. And you're having this conversation with, that's a very Medinan discussion. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I'm with you.
Like the whether to loot or not loot in this moment, and all this stuff that's going on, and there's just like so forth. And I just want to know, like, do I feel personally I need to get my Meccan game straight, so that I'm not like a half-baked person who's thrust into this very busy climate right now, because you can get very confused very easily. Like a new convert who comes into Islam, into Medina, and you're just like, whoa, what's going on?
No, and I'm with you 100%. And I think that this moment is doing that, for us, whether we wanted it to or we didn't. It's certainly forcing us to get back to the basics. What is it, which is, yesterday I was teaching a class about, diseases of the heart, and the disease that we were exploring was putting one's ultimate trust or ultimate hope in other than Allah. And I realized that, part of, just being active participants in our society is engaging certain elements of the society, not in a way that commands our ultimate hope, but we're clearly like deeply, deeply invested. We're like deeply, deeply invested. And I think that we very rarely pause to look at, man, I'm so deeply invested in this. What might, how might this be impacting me negatively? What might I be missing? What might, in terms of just my, like you said, my ability to just keep some perspective, how might I be missing some things, man? And I think that this might be, this is kind of what we're talking about is a big idea, but, this might be kind of the liability of all kinds of systematization. When things become these large systems, we become so invested in their survival, preservation, etc., that thinking about ourselves almost becomes secondary. And that's why Ghazali begins that quote with all of these systems of knowledge that you've learned to think through, throw those out. Toss those. Toss those for a moment. And just think purely in a purely spontaneous way. You, Miraj.
You're right.
You, Ubayd. And I realized that Imam Ghazali took aim at systems of thought. You can also have all kinds of, different systematization that can do the same work of, creating these dogmatic attachments that distance us from really having this self-reflection that you're talking about.
Right. And so I think okay, so again, going back to a concrete step in terms of this is that, one thing that I'm seeing in this moment is that, a lot of being present is not just a choice about what you are choosing to think about, but perhaps even more importantly, what are you choosing not to be thinking about? Okay, and that kind of goes to because if we look at Imam al-Ghazali, and we don't have to make it all about him, but I just had that one thing, I happen to be refreshing on that. He kind of had to kind of block out the world to go on this journey to figure out what is this all really about. And in a way, we're in a world where it's constantly coming at us. This idea of blocking out the world. Because I'm also on these, I'm on Muslim activist forums, and I see the conversation amongst Muslim activists too, not to throw them all into one big bucket together, but there is a part of me that, you're saying, this idea of tawakkul, of complete reliance upon Allah. I don't, we have very, very, very varying levels of commitment to that basic fundamental ideal.
Sure.
And that in itself informs how we are with the partnerships that we create, right? When Dr. Jackson was talking about, certain concepts, he's just look, as a Muslim, this is what I believe, and I have to behave according to this way. I can't negotiate certain things because this affects my relationship with Allah. I have to answer to Allah.
Miraj,
he knows who he is.
It's actually, for me, and forgive me for interjecting, man, but it's just, the things you say, lights go off. This is actually one of those subtle, frameworks that the Prophet, peace be upon him, offers us. And for me, this is proof that he is the messenger of God, because he has this very subtle knowledge about the human condition. So tawakkul is often mentioned alongside tying your camel, right? Tawakkul is mentioned alongside, it's the counterpart of human agency, right? Taking initiative to do something. And what I find about most people, Muslim and non, we are it's only the Prophet, peace be upon him, has a perfect balance of tawakkul and tying the camel. All of us, everyone else, either leans toward the tawakkul or they lean in the direction of tying the camel. And I feel a lot of people that are politically and socially active, I think they lean toward tying the camel. They lean toward, agency and strategy and engagement and this is their lean. And if they aren't careful, they can forget about tawakkul. So our ultimate reliance is upon God. And you have some people that they lean in the direction of tawakkul so much that it can become fatalism.
Yeah,
it can become just. So it's very difficult it's very difficult to balance those, man. Very difficult to balance.
So here's, again, going back to concrete, because again, looking at the chats right now, Rosina had mentioned something about working the 40-hour work week and being a cog in the machines. And it seems everything's so static. We don't have time to think about injustice, or we think about it. If we think about it, we're too exhausted to think about how we feel about it, and not even room to imagine how things could be different. So I think she nailed something here, which I really, Rosina, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's really important, is that we have an opportunity to look at paradigms and the paradigms that we're living in and be like, is this really the right way to live life? Because just because everyone else is doing it, we obviously, it becomes normative for us and we don't know any other way. She's talking about a work week, right? You know, I think a lot of people in human history would look at us in this day and age and be like, why are you guys all working so much? Let me get this straight. You were getting up at this early. You haven't even had breakfast. You don't eat breakfast with your family. What? And then you go straight to work and then you miss lunch with your kids. You don't take a nap in the middle of the day. And then you have to come home at what? 6:30? And then you have to get ready for the next day and do like charts and presentations for the next day. What kind of life is that? I think most of humans in human history would look at us and be like, you guys are idiots and you're crazy. And how can you live a life like this? Because you are not even giving yourself a moment of.
Yeah.
So I think like Rosina's hitting on something here, which I myself have discovered, is that like just the modern construct of work-life balance is completely has zero interest in giving you an opportunity for self-reflection. And
no, Rosina is on point, and I think that this is kind of, you know, there's a connection between the work culture and the consumerism. You know,
yes.
when you work like that, the consumerism just becomes the payoff. Like if I'm gonna kill myself,
I worked hard for it. Why shouldn't I? Yes.
If I'm gonna kill myself working 50, 60 hours a week, then I'm darn sure gonna spend the money in ways that are
right.
Even if they're just momentarily enjoyable. I'm going to enjoy this, you know, because you earned it. And so that becomes cyclical. Right. It just keeps going.
Yes.
Right? You're not, it's almost like instead of working to live, now you're living to work.
But that goes into knowledge of self, because if you're asking yourself, why am I working so hard? Like, look, I've seen this all the time from physicians, because I'm a physician. Physicians love to feel self-important, because they work so hard. Oh, I'm working so hard, and you know, I took care of this and took care of this. But why are you really working that hard? And you know, I don't know. I can't answer for everybody, but I'd like to think a lot of it is driven by the consumerism mentality, or the immigrant, I have to save up mentality or something. But it's not driven by, oh, I've been able to serve humanity. You know, I want to serve humanity 80 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. I don't think it's that. And I think that though that's what I'm saying, knowledge of self is getting to those core motivations of why am I truly doing what I'm doing? And is this really coming from a place of what is good for me? Because we can work ourselves to the grave. That's what most people do, is they work themselves to the grave, because they've bought into a paradigm that our self-worth comes from how much we produce. You know, even as creators, as artists, YouTubers and this and that, our self-worth comes from our productivity in a way that we can show. And that to me is like a silly paradigm that I have been very much a victim of.
Yeah, that's very much.
And you know, what happens in the process of that is my kids lose out, my family loses out.
Yeah, no, they said it's very much a man thing too. That, you know, almost naturally. And I know these days, if you say anything about gender, you get in trouble. But I hope I won't get in trouble. But they say that some women are much more comfortable with the idea of receptivity, just measuring the value of one's experience by how you can receive certain things, you know, and not, you know, measuring by how you just produce. You know, I once had a student, and she was asking me about Laylatul Qadr, you know, and, you know, she was saying, well, right now I'm not praying. So what can I do? And I was thinking, you know, it's interesting. When you think about Laylatul Qadr and you're thinking about something that you can do, as opposed to just being present for Laylatul Qadr and just receiving the blessing that's in the night.
No, but that's exactly it. Because Laylatul Qadr comes in, it's like, how many rakats can I pump out like a piston? How much can I feel good about that I have done? And you're losing the moment of Laylatul Qadr, right? So this is something like I've talked about before, and we have a comment here from, it looks like Mikel, because Mikel showed us how to pronounce their name, so we can pronounce it right. But and they're saying that they have a similar feeling when they're in college. It feels like you're just chasing things to do it. You're just going with the flow. All the trout are jumping up to the next level, and so it's like, let me jump up too. And if there's nothing else from this conversation, I would like to think I'm having some breakthroughs. I gave a talk the other day at the masjid, maybe 200 people were there, and the title of the talk was like the 2 biggest spiritual mistakes I've made in my life so far.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of them, which I think someone mentioned here, is hyper-individualism. Like before I even knew it, hyper-individualism was taking hold of me. The desire to differentiate and to be the desire to achieve. And that, I think, is can be it can be good. It's good to be ambitious, but it can be very dangerous. And you can be lying to yourself, thinking, I'm doing this for Allah, or I'm doing it for this, I'm doing for that. And you're not being true to yourself because you don't know yourself. And so this is kind of what I wanted to get back to, is that I think, many of us, I would imagine, because we're all humans, is that we often tell ourselves stories to continue on a path, but we're not being true to ourselves because we don't know ourselves completely.
You know,
and
I
if
once,
we know
you know,
ourselves,
I
we
was
might be able
once,
to correct.
I was once speaking with the hip hop artist Yasin Bey, or Mos Def, formerly known as Mos Def, in Houston once, and he used an expression. He said, we're all, just, snorting up the gold dust, GOAL, the gold dust. All of these goals. He said the gold dust.
Life hacks and goals and all this stuff.
Yeah, it would take somebody with his, linguistic dexterity to come up with something like that. But yeah, no, some of this stuff is just, just busying ourselves with it for the sake of what, really? I love, there are certain, I'm a collector of certain things. I'm sitting in my office now, and if I just were to pan with the camera, hold on one second. If I were to just pan with the camera, you say, "Oh my God, that doesn't make any sense for one guy to have that many pairs of shoes." But lately, I've been feeling like crazy when I go into shopping malls. I almost feel like a lemming. Like all of these, I feel like if I could get a panoramic view of myself and everyone else, we just look like lemmings in this deeply impersonal, deeply impersonal experience. It's not like going to some artisan or craftsman and getting something you need and you appreciate them and you pay them a good wage and you appreciate the product. But I feel like we're engaged in this activity of just I don't know. It's weird how I feel when I look at a scramble.
I agree with you,
from
but
store to
that
store
often,
just buying stuff.
But that's I think this moment is pulling us out of the paradigms we've been in, and we're looking back and be like, oh my gosh, even if you just look at the magazines and there's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of just stuff that we will continue to consume if people keep putting it in our feed bags. I think that this moment is allowing us to see some of the silly paradigms that we're in. I would hope there are a lot of people out there who maybe because they're working less or they're working from home are recognizing. I have a friend of mine who's a very high-powered person in Silicon Valley who's like, I'm never going back to the office. I'm just not. That paradigm is over. It's broken because I am spending time with my daughter that never existed before. And I will never now give that up again because I never knew what I was missing and what she was missing. And I'm not going back to that. And so in order for us to, kind of tying this back to we were talking, I mentioned Malcolm X before, because he, to me, symbolizes someone who was very Abrahamic in the way that he was pursuing truth. And then when he found truth as the ultimate truth, he never let go of the truth. Even if they tell him you're going to be thrown into the fire, he's just, I got to go to the Autobahn. I'm going. And, he has this sincerity of it. And all I am saying, and I think this comment from Rida Faisal, I really appreciate this comment because this is kind of what I was trying to say. And they just typed it out so nicely. And they said, take it back a little regarding self-reflection. We have not been fostering an atmosphere for each other on a communal level, to be able to be comfortable to sit with ourselves individually. And this is evident just by the rigidity in which we approach our Islam as a whole. Yes, you've said it so clearly, because there is a rigidity. If you look at, for example, there's all this like nonsense in the blogospheres about this sheikh said this, and they are attacking this sheikh, and this sheikh is, all this nonsense. It's nonsense, because the mindset of the community is, in my mind, generalization is not a growth mindset. We are forgetting that people need to grow. People are on a journey. Yeah. So if someone says something wrong, look what this sheikh said, look what this teacher said. Can you believe he associated with this government and he did the? Yeah, it could be wrong, but they're on a journey. Like, are we looking back at Brother Malcolm's life and calling him out, or are we looking at the beauty of who he was trying to become? And if there's anything that I want to step away from this conversation is I really want to put the emphasis, let's continue to learn the root words and the forms of the verbs and all that stuff that we need to do to understand the Quran. But if I had to tell my children what to put their time into, I feel like really fostering, as they wrote in here, fostering as parents for our children, a culture and environment where we understand that the best way to grow, the most powerful way to grow, is by making a mistake. That's how you grow. And that's what I'm talking about, growth mindset, is that mistakes equal growth, and that we are not afraid to make mistakes. In fact, Allah is telling Adam in the very first story of the entire Quran, lesson number 1 is, this is how you do Control Alt Delete. Your job is to keep crashing the computer, try to get the program right. Control Alt Delete. This is how you make Tawbah. We as a Muslim community are like, you see what he did? Look at the mistake he did. They're messing up. Look at this and that. And so that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like I would like to see our community just chill out and recognize that you, Ustad, are on a journey. You might say things that you might move on from 10 years from now. That's what Muhammad Ali said. He said, if I'm the same person I was 10 years ago.
20 minutes ago, I want to move off, bro.
So I don't know. It's just it's
Meraj, man. The conversation. We got to keep doing it. We're gonna have to close this conversation down, but
absolutely,
we got to keep doing it, man. We got to keep doing this. I think that you are bringing to the forefront, questions that everyone is thinking about, but maybe we don't have the words, or don't know how to articulate without sounding irreverent, or I don't know, bro. But I think that we need to grow this tayar, this current. We need to grow this current and continue talking right there. So I'm gonna pause you right there, because my wife has called me at least 3 times. My wife has called me at least 3 times. Probably for dinner. I'm not sure. I'm upstairs in the office. But let's come back to this, man. If you haven't noticed, I'm doing this kind of like Alfu Layla wa Layla, like 1,001 nights. I'm like Shahrazad. I always stop you at a point where I always stop you, at a point of tashweeq, what do you call that in English? Foreshadowing for the next conversation, so I can guarantee to get you back on, inshallah. So we'll have you back on soon, inshallah.
Thank you. And thanks to all the people for sharing.
No, mashallah, no.
We have to appreciate all you guys out there.
We have to open this up, inshallah. Subhana Rabbi Rabbil Izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursaleen, walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Ameen. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum.